So 84 Buddy Landel is one of my favorites.
He one of the best in-ring heels and promos in the wrestling business at that time. That was his best year. It was before he had made enough money to do coke and got out of shape, and his worst instincts took over. He was still hungry, and he was in a territory where he knew he could learn. There was a tremendous upside. Mid-South wrestling, he had to produce, but in the ring, he was better than he ever would be again.
Did he need a Bill Watts type boss to keep him in line?
Yes. I think he did. If he'd have stayed there in Louisiana, instead of going to work for Crockett, he probably would have had a few more really productive years in the business than what he did, because, I mean, everybody's seen Buddy work in different places after that early 86 thing, but he was never that prominent or used in that big a position or made that much money again. It was always, well, yeah, we'll take you in Memphis because, God, buddy, you can work and talk. And I used him in Smoky Mountain because he was local and he's a hometown guy and he could work and talk. And he got, underneath positions in WCW, et cetera. But in 84, he was in 83, he got incredible shape in Memphis. He and Dennis Condrey were working out together because Dennis got a pretty good upper body at that point. And then in 84, like I said, his work was so good and he was in great shape. And then, of course, that's where the downhill slide started, because he was making more money than he'd ever made. And I mean, Buddy had $2,000 weeks being in the middle of the cards in Mid-South because we were doing such good business. And that's where he started riding with Pee Wee Anderson. And that's where, he and Dog started getting together at the hotel. They couldn't go out in public together because of heel and babyface, but they'd get together at the hotel. Buddy had worked there as a rookie in Mid-South several years before that and knew everybody, and he'd met Dog. And so, unfortunately, all the people that got those same interests started gravitating together, and they had the money to spend. And by the end of the year, Buddy was still in good shape, but he was starting to get a little less reliable. And he'd already, he was a horrible driver anyway, and a distracted driver, and he wrecked both of his cars that year. And then by the time that Crockett picked him up and brought him in, and remember, JJ, they did the Smooth Operator video that aired on TBS when Crockett had taken over TBS, and the big push was the new Nature Boy, and there was going to be his showdowns with Flair. But by the time that, he was on the shit, and then after he got fired, he went back to Memphis. He got fat. He got out of shape. He wasn't necessarily lazy. It's just he just did what he did to get by, because he'd had a taste of the big money. So when he wasn't getting paid big money, he wasn't going to do big money work. But nobody was going to give him big money anymore because he was too unreliable.
If you look at him at the end of 85 and then look at him in, when he made his return to the UWF after he left Memphis, and after he left Crockett again, they gave him another shot in 86 when he came back with Dundee.
Yeah.
It was like he stopped going to the gym altogether.
Yeah. And I mean, by the time, and he was thick around the middle when I was using him in Smoky Mountain Wrestling. But in between that last run in 1995 that he had there and 1990 or 91, he had gotten positively large. And then he dropped a lot of weight to do that last run in Smoky Mountain. And then he was in Philly. I had him booked in the Royal Rumble. He was finally going to get a shot. I didn't think at that point, it might have lasted a while because he was back on his good behavior then. And that's why I stuck my neck out. And he was going to be booked in the Royal Rumble, and he goes to Philadelphia for one of the WWF TVs we did to promote it. And he's going into the goddamn hotel in Philly, and it had snowed and there was ice. And for whatever reason, the automatic door opened out, and he's carrying his bags into the hotel, and he slips on the ice, and the doors open at the same time. And when he does a baseball slide into the door, and the door opens on his knee and tears his ACL. And there you go. And that was pretty much the last big time spot that Buddy Landel had in his career.
Do you remember the first time you saw him do the corkscrew elbow?
Yes, it was in Memphis. I mean, his work was impeccable in that elbow, and it was stiff too. You knew it landed. But he, in 83 in Memphis, he really started working out and getting the upper body and really started turning it on. And the kicks and he could throw a forearm that looked like it knocked your fucking head off. Work-wise, he still had that Knoxville accent. I don't know if they would have bought him as the NWA champion, but the way he was working in 1984, if it had been another personality and you just said, okay, I'm going to evaluate this guy's promo ability, his athletic ability, and his working ability, this guy could be in the conversation in 5 years. That's how good he was. Once you told somebody it's Buddy Landel, immediately that conversation stopped because they knew not the person was not going to be able to fucking do that.
And I like Buddy. I got to know Buddy, and I like Buddy.
I did too.
Yeah. I know you did, obviously, but do you think Buddy would have fit in if things had worked out a little differently and Watts did to him what he did to you? Would Buddy have fit into world class in 85?
Oh, boy. He was better than Buddy Landel at that point in time was a better worker than Gino Hernandez or Chris Adams, either one. And I think he was a better promo. For having in-ring matches. I'm not talking about for being a stooge for the Von Erichs, but he was better than Gino or Chris, either one, in the ring and on promos. They had the gimmick and the suits and everything, but Buddy was But I believe with the temptations and the things that were available in Dallas, Texas in 1985, if Buddy had gone to Dallas, he might have died. So, I mean, as far as fitting in, I don't know, would he have put up with working with some of the Von Erichs and some of their picadillos? I keep thinking back to those matches he had with Sonny King where he didn't put up with it. I mean, there was...
you want to know how good Buddy was as a worker in 84? Go watch him and Sonny King.
Yeah. I don't know if he'd have done well in Dallas because there was no babyface on the other side of the ring that would really been a good match for him. The Von Erichs did not work a normal style. Buddy could have got around anything, but it wouldn't have been a lot of fun. He wouldn't have been working with the Fantastics because that was our spot and they were a tag team. I don't know. I mean, it would have been all right, but nothing to write home about. And you asked, that's why with Watts as a boss, and remember, Watts has told a story, and I was there and saw some of the check receipts. Buddy was fined so much at one time for being late, for dressing unprofessionally, for doing something, assing off, whatever, that Watts couldn't take all of the fines out of just one of his checks, or he'd leave him with nothing. So he was paying installments on his fines. Every 2 weeks when he got his check, Watts would take out X amount of dollars as installments on the fines, trying to teach him something. But then as Bill said, and I believe it, because he had that little bonus gimmick going on, he would fine Buddy, but later on when Buddy did something good, he'd bonus him back. He didn't get it all back because he had to teach a lesson of some kind. He got taught a lesson, but he didn't fine him all the money that he really fined him because he'd bonus him some back later on. But you would see that every once in a while on your check from Watts. You would see the payoffs, and it would be plus 100 or plus 150 or plus whatever the fuck. For some reason, if he thought either it's a top guy and I booked him in a shitty town, I'm going to take care of him, or he went over and above, or he put in extra time, or just I like the way the kid's coming along, you just see a bonus pop up every once in a while. But you had Grizzly Smith to keep an eye on Buddy. You had Watts to cut a promo on him when he got out of line. And you had some of his friends, but people he respected in the locker room, so he didn't go too far afield, and he was still hungry and still wanting to make the big money. That's why his most formative years were in that environment. And one more thing, and then you can take this wherever you want. Funniest thing I ever saw. We're all at the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, right, for a TV taping, Mid-South Wrestling. And Watts is giving one of his pre-show speeches, and he's like, And let me tell you this, I'm sick and tired seeing all of you assholes throwing these shitty kicks. If you're going to kick a guy, kick him in a safe place and lay it in. Right, just like this. Buddy had just bought with one of his big checks, because, I mean, he was making $350 a week in Tennessee, and he comes to Louisiana, and now he's $2,000 some weeks, whatever the fuck. So he's going to spend some money, right? And it was a big deal back in those days to get one of those Halliburton suitcases. The shiny silver or gold metallic suitcases that were like it's like the Louis Vuitton of the day, but they were indestructible. They were hard-sided, made out of metal. They locked, great traveling bags. You carry valuables in them, whatever. All the boys, when they made money, that was one of their status symbol things. They'd get a Halliburton. Buddy got him a Halliburton. And Watts is talking about these shitty, phony-looking kicks being thrown. He says, just like this. He pulls Buddy's Halliburton out and sets it in the middle of the floor, and I'm sitting cross-legged in the floor, and all the guys are on chairs in this little tiny locker room. And Watts says, when you lay a kick in like this, use the flat of your foot and lay it in like this. And he fucking flat-footed kicked that Halliburton all the way across the room. If you'd have kicked a motherfucker in the head like this, you'd have given him brain damage, right? Boom, that's the way you throw a kick. And he goes over and gets it, Watts does, and he sets it back up. He said, now, he's going to show him again. Again now. You measure back, you make sure people can see, and you throw it. He kicks that thing with the flat of his foot, and it flies across the floor again, scraping across the floor. And if I'm lying, I'm flying, and my feet have not left the ground. Watts goes and gets it one more time, and he sets it down, and he says, now I reiterate. And just then, Buddy jumped up from his fucking folding chair, got down on his hands and knees over the top of the Halliburton and said, no, Bill, use my head this time. But that was the way Watts wanted you to kick, by God. Because nobody was going to see through that shit.
Hey, one last thing, and then we'll wrap things up. I've never believed it, and I heard it directly from Buddy, and I still don't believe it.
Okay.
Was Buddy going to be the NWA champion?
No. That program with Flair, they didn't do it everywhere. And even though they sold out in Raleigh, there weren't they only wrestled singles 2 or 3 times, right? As I can remember, that was right before and right as we were coming into Crockett's territory. I think at the time, I don't know this to be true. I don't know it to be false. I don't know it because but I would surmise that when they drew a house like that and they had made that build, to not continue with those matches, either there was something that Rick either didn't like about the matches or something that Dusty didn't like about what Buddy was doing outside the ring, or they would have made a bigger deal of that because it started off so they were leading in that direction, and it did do business and get interest, but it was cut off and downplayed. Maybe it was because Dusty knew that he wanted to make Flair a full-fledged heel so that he could, that Starrcade match that year. That may be it. But they were still trying to do something with Buddy because the hangover happened afterwards, but he was not. No, I mean, I can entirely believe that somebody said to him at that time, Buddy, you can be at someday, or you're good enough, or you might be, or they might talk about it or whatever, but nobody went to Buddy Landel and said, you're going to be the NWA world champion. And then they just didn't do it. That didn't usually happen in those days, even if it was a guy that you could trust as a person to carry it. You didn't just go around. They didn't go around saying, you're going to be the champion next week, and then you're going to be the champion in February, and blah, blah, blah. It was a little more difficult than that.